wait, which one?
That's a
Yeah,
chance,
okay,
83,000 tons. We just sailed on, we just did, Navigator, which is 100, no. We just did Liberty at Sea, which is 154,000. So you did 83, we did 154.
And mine is even big.
Oasis
Yeah,
is
you
275,000. So that's Icon, it's all the way up there, it's 251,000, that's Icon disease. It's a whole like 1,200 crew and
And it costs them like $2 billion to.
Yep, I agree.
2 or 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like billions of
Yeah,
dollars.
what's another million?
But right now, these are the two biggest. So one of the seas sailing out of it's been a really long time. Symphony of the Seas, and Oasis of the Seas are the two I think that rotating out of. Oasis is there right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you're sitting,
It's like right outside my door.
you're seeing the ship looking across the water at the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've totally said that.
So for the 9-year cruise, it was 275. And we were literally walked out. You walk out the door from customs, there's the pay.
Yeah.
We were one floor up. Parking garage.
Yeah, I
The
know.
parking garage is for the continuous cruisers and people that are, getting lost in the area.
Nice. Yeah. Try and talk to everyone anyway.
Maybe it's just a nice stuff, being continuous cruise.
We did that one.
How long?
He's like,
5-day cruise.
I mean, these people just don't know so much stuff. I read that some of these people, we went on one of the cruises, they just book from cruise to cruise to cruise, and they get cheaper rates.
It's cheaper than that. We book it for other things. It's cheaper than stay at
Hotel. Yeah.
He said they should be 10 minutes.
Because you have one resource and all your meals.
I know, it's
Sean, I have not heard from Robin. She's
Away for 3 weeks.
okay. Oh, okay.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, July the 18th. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be aware this meeting is being live streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and also the meeting may be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. The first item of business is the opportunity for public comment. Is Is there anyone attending who would like to raise an issue that is not on the agenda tonight, or who has a question or comment for the board or staff? Very good. We'll move on to the next item of business, which is discussion and possible approval of a request for a waiver for 1205 Ward Avenue, Brandywine Regional Airport. Brian, you're going to introduce the subject for us?
Yes. So on the screen here in front of you is the subdivision and lot consolidation plan for the Brandywine Airport, which is located at 1205 Ward Avenue. They have prepared a plan. It will be before the Planning Commission on August the 8th for their recommendation to you for the board, for your consideration for the plan. They are in front of you tonight. Joe Russell is here from Howell Engineering to present the waiver request and answer any questions about the waiver. The West Goshen Township ordinance does not have a provision to allow a preliminary final plan to go through without a preliminary approval. So the waiver is to allow the plan to go through as a preliminary final, which means the plan would come before you and the Planning Commission once, not twice, in this process. This is a simple plan. Just some lot line changes. They're actually widening the buffer. You see the red and black line is here, so they're actually getting a little bit of property from QVC to widen the buffer between QVC's property and the edge of their lot line.
Is there a reason for that, Joe?
Joe may be able to speak better to that.
Yeah, it's just for them to just have a little bit more separation between properties and just have a little bit more property.
Is there, is there why not more than what was, shown here? Why was there a specific dimension or, requirement or benefit from this particular sliver?
I think it's just to give them a little bit more of a buffer. That's really the only reason.
This was enough to satisfy that need?
That was enough to satisfy the needs.
And if you get really nitty-gritty, actually, the runway in one part of it is actually on the QVC property. This all could be allowed for winter operation to plow snow and keep it on their property as well, from my discussions with the president, Jerry, of the airport, Jerry Valentino. So it's to clean some things up. Down here at the very end of the runway towards 202, you can see there's a light gray line. That's the runway. The runway is actually, as currently constructed, is physically on QVC property. So to clean up some of those legal items.
Okay.
So just to clarify, so we're going to discuss this tonight. We're not going to take any action.
You're going to, tonight, the only action would be if you choose to grant the waiver. So they have the waiver, they know they have it, and they can come back before you for a preliminary final. If you don't grant the waiver, they got to come for preliminary, and they're coming down the final.
And then we'll have the planning commission take a look at it for their recommendation.
Yes. Okay. Yes. There's no construction proposed. It's just a lot.
Any other questions for, I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Joe Rosella.
Joe Rosella or Brian?
Is that going to be paid? Is that
Property going to be paved or used for access, vehicle access at all?
There will be no changes whatsoever, just an exchange of property.
Okay.
You say an exchange, just around a sale though, right?
Yes, not a sale, just an exchange. Not a sale.
What's being exchanged then? What's being given up by the airport? Maybe
It's
this is
just to move the lot line. And that's really, that was just to clean things up. Again, there was no other purpose for it, no construction associated, just helped with the way that the properties are described.
Okay.
And the exchange of acreage.
Any other questions for the board? Does anyone attending have a question? Okay, this board member wanted to make a motion here to grant the waiver from the need to grant the request for a preliminary final land development plan to proceed forward.
Yes, so moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tina. Is there any final questions or comments from the board or anyone attending? Very good. We'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 5, discussion and possible approval of a request for a waiver from section 7219C and 7244 of the West Goshen Township Subdivision and Land Development Ordinance for a land development plan for 328 West Town Road, property of Kia of Westchester. And again, I think, Brian, you want to introduce this?
Yes. So I'll start with the second waiver request. So Kia of Westchester is proposing to redevelop and expand the building. The expansion totals greater than 5,000 square feet of new floor area, and that's important, and I'll explain why in a minute here. So the first waiver, 7244, is again plan processing to go preliminary final. Since this is an existing site, the construction is consistent of some additions proposed. There's a proposed addition on the north of the building, the south of the building, and some rearranging of the parking to allow for better handicap access and safer access to the front of the building. This is to bring the current Kia building up to current Kia dealership standards with the Kia manufacturing. The plan itself has been reviewed. It is currently in my queue to review next week for the resubmission. And if all goes well, it will be before the planning commission in August. They're before you tonight for a waiver for preliminary final, again, like the last plan. And additionally, they have a second waiver request, which is where the 5,000 feet comes in. This is what I have in front of you right now is the existing conditions plan of Kia. Township ordinance requires that any property that it proposes commercially more than 5,000 square feet of floor area to provide what's called an EIA or environmental impact statements. They've asked for a waiver from that requirement because the building itself is staying in the same footprint and they're actually reducing their impervious coverage of the property. So they're actually going to benefit the property, but there isn't any environmental features currently on the property because it's currently basically with the property lines as a car dealership. So the EIA was there really wasn't any environmental features to discuss because of what the project is, but the ordinance requires it. So that's why they're here seeking the waiver to not provide it because of the conditions of the existing site. I don't have any objection to either waiver request. And once again, Joe is here from Hal. I keep always saying deal Hal. From Hal Engineering, and to answer any questions you may have. And once again, we'll be back before you again for their plan. This is just for the two waivers.
Okay.
What do we require in the EIA?
The EIA requires an evaluation of existing natural features on the site, any impact of those features, impact to the school district, impact to the transportation, impact to your roads, anything else. So it's an existing car dealership, it's remaining a dealership. It's actually improving the green space is improving, you're lowering their impervious coverage. So the green space on the lot is going to improve with the redevelopment. The business is staying the same, the amount of people working there, nothing is changing except they have to bring the building up to current standards to provide better service for the customers.
Would that be equivalent to phase one?
Phase one looks at what's in the ground first.
What's phase two? Phase one's just a paper study, basically.
Yes, phase one and EIA, there are different levels of what's in phase one is more for paper study for tanks or anything else in the property and all that stuff. EIA does not get into what the phase one means.
Okay.
The EIA itself is separate.
Because my only concern is not what the current property use is, it's what the past use could have been. I mean, I've seen a lot of cases where we found things in the ground that never existed, neither did the current owner. So waiving an environmental study sometimes.
Well, this went through land development back when it went from a Land Rover to Kia. This used to be Land Rover dealership. So there was a time when this was built to the Land Rover. I found the old land development.
But that's the same building footprint though, right? Just a transfer.
Yeah, so it was something else, then it became the Land Rover dealership, then Land Rover, then it became Kia, from what I could find in the chain of title.
Either one of them can have ground storage tanks, either for consumption purposes or for gasoline.
There's nothing in our file that indicates it was there.
Any party that was in that.
Yeah. So when the Land Rover was built, that went through land development at the time, the township. When it changed hands to the Kia, it didn't have to go through land development because it was continuing the use of being the car dealership.
The building expansion is over existing impervious coverage, which
Yes.
is parking presumably.
Yes.
Could you show on the diagram what is the additional green space that's being proposed?
This hatched area, Joe, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yes. So they're reducing the paving out to the property line and bringing it in compliant with the current parking setbacks.
Okay, so how wide is that strip?
It's 10 feet wide.
10 feet wide.
That was-
Proposed just to be grass?
Yes, that's correct. And there's the opportunity to put some landscaping there as well.
3,719 square feet.
It's a small increase in green space, relatively speaking, relative to the size of the lot. Is what I'm saying.
Let me see. Get your zoning chart up here.
Yeah, that is correct. It represents about 2.1% of an increase in green space.
I don't have the plan with
Yeah,
that
that's
chart.
okay, Brian. Joe's good.
What about for stormwater provisions?
They're proposing an underground stormwater facility.
But that's going to be done under the land development approval.
Yes. I reviewed that. That's the construction.
So the EIA would not address that.
Okay, sorry, I just have a couple questions. So what is this currently zoned? What's the zoning for this?
It's the multi-use.
It's the multi-purpose.
Multi-purpose.
Okay.
Purpose.
And what does our ordinance allow as far as square footage for anything here? I guess my question is it within our square footage requirement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are compliant. I had a couple zoning questions in my first letter that they believe they've addressed in their resubmission.
Okay.
Yes. It is permitted use and they were compliant. They're making things that were not compliant, they're making compliant now
Right.
with this change.
But the square footage is going to increase,
The building square footage of the lot coverage is increased.
right, but the building square footage is going to increase by 5,000 square feet or so?
Yes, slightly greater than 5,000 square feet. The purpose for the increase, again, since it was the Land Rover, Kia just simply moved into the Land Rover dealership. The current requirements from Kia to continue to get the franchise, you have to make it architecturally compatible to the corporate standards, and that's primarily the reason for their expanding the front, having a two-story glass, and expanding the service area to enhance the customer experience, as well as expanding a little bit of the service area. So though the cumulative increases in those areas put it over the 5,000 square feet, that would necessitate the need for the EIA report.
Got it.
And again, the EIA report focuses on the emergency services and focuses on some tax information, not really getting into the environmental aspect of anything that's underground in phase one, but more along the lines of how it affects the community and the township in terms of needs. Again, with the use that's a car dealership, remaining a car dealership, we identified that it doesn't affect anything, and that the preparation of this study is just saves a little bit of just producing the same information that's already there.
And you're comfortable with, okay.
Yeah, if this was a site that had green space and all that, yes, prepared with the EIA. But just that they were taking away green, they're actually providing more green than they already have.
Okay.
Brian, the stormwater calculations, et cetera, is it going to be based on the full lot, or is it just on the 5,000-foot building expansion consideration?
It's based on their area of their regulated activity, which is the area they're disturbing. So if it's existing paving and they're not touching it, it doesn't count. But anywhere they're digging up, so the area they're removing counts in their area.
So that hashed area is being disturbed, right?
Yes.
So it will be part of the calculation
Yes.
for stormwater improvement.
Yes. And it's designed under the current ordinance you adopted in September of last year, not the ordinance that was adopted under what was approved more than 5 years ago because their approval expired.
Other questions from the board? I have one thing that's a suggestion for consideration during the land development process. I understand, you're given this 10-foot green strip. I would prefer it not to be lawn, grass. I would prefer to see some kind of natural tree buffer there put in. So, deciduous trees or something else, maybe some shrubs. Actually, I think it might be lower maintenance versus having to cut grass all the time. I think it will enhance the value of the property. The board is very interested in having more sustainable features on these redevelopments. We often have to approve, per our current ordinance, commercial redevelopment that removes mature trees only has to replace a certain percentage of them. So the canopy in West Goshen is reducing. So where we have an opportunity to influence at this point, for land development, we can suggest and ask that you consider, more natural tree type situation instead of just this grass strip. Could you take that into consideration?
Absolutely, and I believe that not so much in the back, but we can redistribute some of the landscaping we were putting around the perimeter to shift it in those areas. But absolutely, that if it benefits the perimeter, and we're happy to consider that. Absolutely.
Yeah. But if you just bring in a proposal forward, work with Brian on that, and then obviously the planning commission and the board will ultimately see it fine.
Yeah, you would see it again. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
On that line, is there any consideration for solar rays or on the roof of the new building?
I'm not entirely sure of the architecture of the building, whether there is any solar panels being considered.
Okay.
Or even if the shape of the building from Kia would even have a roof structure.
I know,
before.
exactly.
I can't speak to the Kia shape of the building because it's a corporately driven
Right.
building from the Frankfurt.
But I'm just wondering if they could look at it and see if that's.
Yeah, maybe when you come to the planning commission, you can discuss with them whether the building's amenable to that, and if it is amenable, maybe you can make sure the roof is designed to be able to hold a solar array at some future point.
And on that note, have an electric charging vehicle station. I mean, it is going to be a car dealership.
I believe that they would incorporate that.
I would
because
think they would.
They
I
do
would
have
think they
electric
would.
vehicles.
Yeah, that I can tell you that they have them at their dealership in Goodsville. They'll probably be adding them to the dealership.
I can't imagine you couldn't.
So
You're going to be selling cars here in the next 10 years, you got to have electric charging.
when is this going to be due to come before the planning commission, the land development plan?
It's scheduled for me it's on my review queue for next week.
Okay, so you haven't even looked at it yet?
I haven't looked at the resubmission all the way yet now.
Okay, so you have some points here from the board
Yes.
to consider when you look at it, Brian,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Any other questions for either Brian or Joe? Are there any public questions or comments about this redevelopment or this addition? Okay, so board, are we happy to consider both requests for waivers together, or does anyone want to separate the two requests?
Not together.
Together? Okay. Is there a member of the board who would like to make a motion to approve the request for waivers from section 7219C and 7244 for this property?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Also,
Thank you, John. Final comments or questions from anyone on the board or in attendance? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is item number 6, discussion of the 2022 financial audit for West Goshen Township, presented by Carl Hogan of BBD Inc. Welcome, Carl. If you wouldn't mind using the microphone, that'd be great. Chris, I don't know if the microphone's on or ready to go.
Yes, I turned it on.
You may need to lean in a little bit. We'll pick it up either way, whatever you're comfortable with.
Yes. Okay. Just let me know if you can hear me. I'm going to give a summary. Well, first off, my name is Carl Hogan from the firm of BBD. We're located in Philadelphia. As I was just discussing before, I can't tell you the last time I saw the office, but that's where our main office is and where our mail goes and so forth. But it is our first year doing the audit for West Goshen Township, so I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide our services for this year. Can't take credit for any of the work that was done. I know the business office with Christine and my staff worked with the township staff. I'm pinch hitting for Mike, who was the main lead on the audit. He had something to do with the son, so hopefully, if I can't answer any of your questions, we'll get back to you. But I reviewed the information before tonight, and I will do my best in terms of answering any questions that you have. But I think I'm pretty well prepared. All right.
Did you turn on? This side.
Yeah, I turned it on.
I can do it for you.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right, so we just put some brief slides together, pretty consistent with what was done in previous years, to kind of outline, what our responsibilities are, what we did during the audit process, to kind of go over some of the summary results of the audit for 2022 without getting too deep into the information. It's a pretty big document, but just to keep it at a high level. And if anybody has any deeper questions, we can go over them as well. But as part of the audit process, what we actually produced 5 audit reports, individual audit reports. The first one being the main audit document, which is the largest audit document, and that's the basic financial statements that we present in accordance with U.S. Generally accepted accounting principles. Also, we produce a DCED filing, which is basically a replica of what is filed with the state. It's the only requirement that the state has in respect to what kind of financial information is being filed with them. So what you've got is a copy of the report, and that is what we file electronically with the state. And what they do is they accumulate that information in their database. And if you go on their website on DCED, you can see all the different municipalities, and they kind of compile them all and kind of get some compile it statewide, and then you can kind of compare by municipalities, by county, etc. The next, we also do a separate financial statement for your sewer and your sewer reserve funds. We completed audits for the police, non-uniform, and sewer pension plans, and then also we did an audit of the tax collector statement of collections, and that's actually on the cash basis. We did not audit the sewer authority financial statements. The sewer authority is considered what we call a blended component unit, and it's actually included in the financial statements of the township because of various factors, primarily being it just benefits the township primarily. The board is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. There's various reasons why it's included within the financial statements. And also, just want to point out one other thing too. The other big deadline, besides reporting the DCED with the state by April 1st, is you also have to report to the EMA for your bond filing. So the sewer authority has bonds, and there's an EMA database related to your bonds that needs to be filed by June 30th of each year as well. So we had to work with the component auditors and within putting the audit report together and kind of time that out so those EMA reporting requirements were being met. Timing, we met with management beforehand, before year end. We came up with a timetable for the audit prior to the conduct of our audit. We conducted our preliminary audit procedures in January. We did a majority of our field work in March in preparation of putting that DCED report together, so it was to state by April 1st. And then we had a time deadline date of presenting the final reports in June for that EMA reporting filing deadline. And the last bullet point there is talking about the reporting deadlines we just had talked about. There we go. I think I was pressing the wrong one. I was pressing the up button. So I'm going to go over a couple, pages in the auditor's report, just kind of give summaries. The most important thing in your auditor's report is the independent auditor's report, and it's broken out into different main sections. And the most important thing is the opinion paragraph. So I don't know if everybody remembers, in previous years that opinion paragraph was kind of buried. They kind of changed the layout of the independent auditor's report, added some additional information. You probably know this one's from about 2 pages to about 3 pages now, but the most important thing, and should be at the front of the auditor's report, being the opinion paragraph, basically stating that the numbers that were presented to us by management for the year ended December 31st, 2022 were fairly presented, or in other words, they're unmodified or a clean audit report. The other main sections of the audit report are management's responsibility, and then another big section is auditor's responsibility. This is a section of the auditor's report that has changed recently, last year into this year. Our responsibilities haven't changed, but what they've actually done in the auditor's responsibilities section of the audit report is clearly delineated what our responsibilities are. I think there's 5 different bullet points. So before it was just kind of vague, and now they kind of said, okay, we're going to clearly delineate what your responsibilities are, or our responsibilities are, and even though they haven't changed, but now they're outlined. The last part of the independent auditor's report kind of outlines what responsibility we're taking for the different sections of the auditor's report, or for the audit report. Required supplementary information. There's 2 main sections of the required supplementary information in your auditor's report, in your audit report. The first being management's discussion and analysis, and that's in the first section of the audit report. I think it's on pages 4 through 15 or 16 or so forth. And this gives management the opportunity to kind of give a brief synopsis of financial activities of the township for the year ended December 31st, 2022. If everybody wasn't going to read the full 60, 70 page document, I really encourage everybody to read those pages, as I think the management does a really good job, real detailed, informational about the financial activities and how you ended up where you were and what financial position you ended up for the year ended and as of December 31st, 2022. The other big sections of the required supplementary information are related to your pension and your OPEB, related to the funding of those, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more later on in this presentation. But there's a lot of actuarial information in those reports, and as such, we don't give an opinion on the actuarial information. So we don't give an opinion on management's discussion and analysis. We just make sure that it is consistent with the rest of the auditor's report, because of the different actuarial valuation information. We don't also give a opinion on those supplemental schedules in the back. Supplementary information, now this is parts of the audit that we do give our opinion on related to the financial statements, and this consists of some of the budgetary schedules in the back, in addition to some combining schedules for your non-major governmental funds, in addition to your fiduciary funds in the back. So basically, there's non-major funds and there's fiduciary funds, and they kind of roll up into larger, consolidated information in the front. So we kind of give an opinion to indicate that those consolidating funds are fairly stated in relation to the rest of the financial statements, and the same thing with the budgetary information in the back of the audit report. Also, there's some other reporting back a while ago. The Township used to issue a comprehensive financial report, and there's some statistical information that's kind of carried over historically, and management and the board have thought that's important to keep on carrying that forward, the 10-year statistical historical information. Even though you're not applying for the board, I think it's good information, not only for the board to have, but the public to see. In many instances, it's even more worthwhile than some of the other information in the financial report. Also, we talk about our financial reporting requirements under government auditing standards. The final thing here, and that is new for the current year, is there's a pretty big GASB that was implemented for the Township for the current year, and it relates to leases. So in the case of the Township, they really don't have that many leases. So what we did is we evaluated the main leases, which are just copiers, mail machines, and we kind of looked at it all. And we determined that it was kind of immaterial to the financial statements to actually implement the new standard in the current year. The cost benefit of having to put those leases on the books and having to track them and take them off and put them on, you get new copiers, you can get other new equipment wasn't worth putting in there. So basically, when you implement GASB 87, a lot of the times the asset and the liability associated with those leases kind of match each other, so they weren't that large, and the difference between the two, you actually amortize the actual asset, and the liability on the lease usually kind of coincide and kind of decrease in conjunction with each other. So when you take that into effect, in addition to the amounts not being that material, we decide not to actually implement it in the current year. So yeah, maybe any questions? But yeah.
I have a question on that. So that is discretionary. We don't have to report to these GASB standards on leases. It's whose discretion? Management's discretion?
Yeah, it's management's discretion to determine whether the cost benefit of actually having to report those leases on the books is worth whatever. Okay. I mean, if you I was discussing earlier, I mean, if you had like a facility that you were leasing or some land, that would actually be very material to the financial statements. But when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars, when you look at it, because this would only be reported at the full accrual financial statement, so that's when you take into account all your capital assets, all your liabilities, it would be very small compared to the full.
Thank you.
Yep. The audit approach, I'm going to kind of go over what we do as part of our audit process. So as our, being a first-year audit client, our first, assignment is when we come here during our preliminary work during January, is to perform a risk assessment and to, determine those areas of the highest risk as part of our audit process. The first thing that we do is when we came on board is we came in and we documented the internal controls of the township. We made different inquiries of management, staff, and the board. We prepared, did some analytical procedures at the beginning to kind of identify any kind of anomalies. And we also, reviewed any kind of current financial reports and prior year audit reports, et cetera. And as part of that, we, tailor our audit procedures accordingly. So in the case of West Goshen Township, some of the areas that we consider riskier expenditures, we do expenditure control testing, payroll control testing, revenues. We are able to actually perform some pretty high-level third-party confirmation of your revenues just because of taxes being collected. We're able to actually confirm through third parties a lot of that tax revenue, and a lot of the revenue is actually confirmed, which is a very high-level method of audit procedures to kind of get comfort level with those numbers that are being reported. As you can see, the next bullet point down, we designed our audit procedures to focus on audit areas of higher risk, as I just discussed. We also reviewed meeting minutes, contracts, and other agreements. We accumulate those in our permanent file, and then we kind of apply those to our audit procedures. And then the bulk of our audit consists of substantive audit procedures where we perform valuation allocation procedures. We do cutoff procedures. We look at rights and obligations and different things. And so that's the bulk of our audit procedures in terms of making sure that the numbers that are being presented to us are fairly presented.
I have a question on
Yep.
the risk assessment, the initial work you did. So you looked at the current use of internal controls.
Yep.
Do you know if there was anything you found there that you did not find that you would have expected to find in terms of the way of an internal control based on your experience in dealing with other Pennsylvania municipalities and boroughs, etc.?
Well, the good news is in terms of West Goshen, you have the ability, because of the structure of your business office staff, to be able to implement the proper internal controls. There are situations when you're dealing with a smaller municipality or township where you can't necessarily implement those, and you have to kind of rely on the board and other compensating controls, but you have that comfort level here at the township, having a staff of the size to be able to actually implement those controls to the fullest extent within the business office.
Thank you.
Well, but was there anything that you found that you would suggest that you felt that we are not doing that could be or should be adopted?
Not that I'm aware of. We did not have any kind of report or anything related to any kind of segregation of duties or any kind of internal controls as part of our audit that I'm that I don't know if you guys had any conversations as part of. I know sometimes conversations are had that don't arise to having to be reported to the board of doing things better, etc. Okay. So now we're going to get into the
Before, again, one more question before you leave that. You want to, just for the record, I know it's talked about in your report, but were there any issues with the audit procedure, such as access to records, staff availability, or accommodations, or anything of that nature?
Oh, there was no issues at all regarding or any kind of disagreements, and I think that's part of the presentation too with management or any of the staff. So now we're going to kind of go over the fund balance results, and this is kind of a summary from pages 24 and 26 of your audit report. Your main fund is your general fund, and the general fund had an increase in the fund balance of $3.7 million. The previous year, the fund balance was $17.6 million. You had the $3.7 million, $21.2 million of fund balance, and I think on the next slide we kind of talk, the reasons, for some of that increases year over year. You also have a capital reserve fund. It had a decrease of fund balance of about $404,000. So during the current year, you transferred over money for planned projects and purchases during the year. It decreased by $404,000. So that means you had about $1.8 million of expenditures, which were in excess of the $1.4 million of revenue that came into the fund during the year. In addition, you have some other governmental funds that are either would consider major or non-major. Most of these consist of special revenue funds. The one that we're going to talk about here on the slide is the American Rescue Plan Fund. So you receive $2.4 million for your American Rescue Plan, and you're accounting for those funds in a separate special revenue fund. And what you're doing is you receive those funds, you're deferring them, and as you spend them, you're going to reduce that deferred revenue, recognize the revenue and the expenditure at the same time, kind of match them at the same time. And then you can see over there on the right-hand side, you have the different bar graphs related to those governmental funds and when they stood at year end. Also within the other governmental funds, which isn't up on here, is you have a liquid fuels fund, which is by law segregated by the state, and this accounts for your appropriations through PennDOT. And you know, on an annual basis, I think you receive about $600,000-$700,000 on an annual basis, and those monies need to be spent on roads and maintenance throughout the year. And I think the other big non-major governmental fund is your off-site development fund. Those monies account for monies that come in from contractors and so forth, and they are accounted for in a special revenue fund.
I have a question. I think it's really for Christine. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is the capital reserve fund was we specifically had budgeted for a decrease in the balance in that fund during 22.
Yeah, we did not budget for transfer.
Yeah.
I would have to go back and look.
Yeah.
I can confirm that, but.
I'm pretty sure we felt the balance in there was more than healthy enough, and we weren't going to not transfer
If I
it
remember
forward.
correctly.
Yeah. Thank you.
They blend together.
And there's about $5 million sitting in that fund at the end of the year. So in the audit report on pages 28 and 29, there's the general fund budgetary comparison statement. And as I go around and I do my presentations at all the different municipalities, I feel like I'm on auto repeat in terms of everybody, in 2021 and in 2022, everybody had really good years with respect to their transfer tax and their earned income taxes being more than anticipated. And I keep on saying too, you got to get, it appears, even though this is our first year, you have to be conservative with respect to these types of revenues and consider them as one-time windfalls. I would anticipate as I go around and do my audits for next year, I would imagine with transfer taxes and so forth like that, we're going to see a decrease on those for 2023. So when we're actually looking at what was actually budgeted and how you actually ended up for the year, most of the positive effects that you have within your general fund balance are being driven by these two revenue sources. So these are things that you can't control, but at the same time need to be conservative when you're going through on an annual budget process. I have seen, with the earned income taxes, that they have been increasing across the board throughout the municipalities, even before COVID. And once again, that's one of those revenue sources that you want to be conservative with throughout the budget process. Expenditures were under budget by $863,000. That's really good when you look at it with respect to a $17 million fund balance. And if you actually compare it to, percentage-wise, you're talking about 5% being under. So once again, that's where you can control, what is being spent on an annual basis and how it came in compared to budget. A budget transfer of nearly $1.2 million was transferred to the capital reserve fund, which we just discussed was planned for the current year. And at the beginning of the budget process, as you went into 2022, you plan to use $562,000 of fund balance, but because of the positive results primarily of the earned income taxes and the transfer taxes, you actually had an increase of $3.7 million in your fund balance. Also within the audit report, we have what we call proprietary funds. The township has two main proprietary funds, one for its sewer operations and one for its waste and recycling. This is a picture of what the net position for each one of those funds was for the year ended December 31st, 2022. If you also look at the proprietary fund financial statements, this is where we're going to find that blended component unit for the sewer authority, and you can see that its net position is a lot higher than the net position of the operations for the sewer and for the waste and recycling, and that's because the sewer authority was created to house or to maintain the actual infrastructure of the sewer authority and to issue the associated debt with that infrastructure related to the sewer authority. So what you see there, that $35 million is basically what the book value of, for all intents and purposes with some other assets and so forth, the net book value of the capital assets in the sewer authority, less any kind of long-term associated liabilities with those. And then you have the sewer fund, which accounts for the sewer fund operations. So you have the authority, which accounts for the long-term assets and liabilities, and then you have the operations, which is actually the billing and collection of sewer fees throughout the year, and the same thing with the waste and recycling net position also being the excess of the assets over the liabilities related to the collection of the revenues and expenditures for those operations. The next question we're going to talk, or the next not question, but the next slide we're going to talk about is about the pension plans, and these are the fiduciary funds within your financial statements. And in the back of the financial statements, on pages 67 through 72, there's some actuarial information. And if you go back to 6 or 72, you're going to see kind of like a little bit of a ping pong. So all the gains that you had in 2020 and 2021 were wiped out in 1 year. So you went effectively, as you see from all the plans, to about 110% fully funded in those pension plans, back down to, I'm seeing anywhere from 85 to 90%, which is totally normal in any other kind of situation related to funding your pension plans. And now, through today, things seem to be trending back the other way. So I don't want to jinx anything, but I would anticipate if things keep going in a positive direction through the current year, you're going to see more of a positive funding progress within your net pension liabilities at the end of December 31st, 2023. And just to kind of go over the specific percentages that each one of them were funded, the police pension plan was funded at 92%. The actual liability in which the net assets of the actual fiduciary plan were less than the actuarial liability was $1.8 million. And in the case of the non-uniform pension plan, it was 75% funded, and the actual liability, actuarial liability, was more than the assets of $3.7 million at year end. And then also you have the sewer pension fund, which is 80%, resulting in a net pension liability of 1.6, and that's kind of outlined in the back. So what you're going to see is an up and a down in terms of, if you look at the bottom line, in terms of it turning from a liability to an asset, now back to a liability again. So we will see what happens. But each one of those percentages as in relation to their funding would be acceptable to the state in relation to what they expect to see for funding on pension plans.
Carl, could you remind people what a fiduciary fund is versus the other funds?
Yeah, but fiduciary fund is a fund in which you maintain or the custodian of other people's funds. So in the case of the pension funds, these amounts are being put away for the employees for the future benefit of those employees. So they're not actual assets to the township. They can't be used for normal operations. They need to be used for their intended purposes or in a separate trust for those intended purposes of being future pension benefits for current, future, and former employees.
Thank you.
The OPEB plan, this is an additional, schedule in the back of the audit report, and this is a benefit that's primarily provided to the police of the township. This is something that isn't funded, is something that is not required to be funded. The township currently pays these benefits as they are due, so as you go through the budget process every year, you determine how much you're going to have to pay out in these benefits on an annual basis, and you build that into your budget. Make sure that there's appropriate revenues to pay for those benefits as they become due during the year. So in the case of West Goshen Township at December 31st, 2022, the OPEB liability was actually $6 million. A lot of times these liabilities are large amounts just because of the benefits that are included within the collective bargaining agreements, in particular of the police. These numbers typically are large, and like I said, there is no requirement to fund them, and the only requirement is to fund the benefits as they become due, and that's documented in the second bullet point there. There is no trust arrangement to fund these OPEB plan expenditures at this point. As part of our audit, we have required communications that we're supposed to communicate as part of our audit. We do issue what we call a professional standards letter that kind of outlines all this. It's kind of a boilerplate letter. You want a boilerplate letter because otherwise you don't want any kind of modifications to it, because that could suggest that we did have issues or waived entries that were considered material, etc. But just to kind of go through them right now, as we just discussed before, we didn't have any significant difficulties in dealing with management and completing the audit. Everything was performed and done on a timely basis. We did waive those entries related to GASB statement number 87 because we had determined that the cost benefit of recording them would not be worth it and clearly immaterial. There was no material audit entries that we made during our audit process. So basically the numbers that management was presenting to you on a monthly basis is exactly what's being reflected in these financial statements. No disagreements with the respect to the application of generally accepted accounting principles, cooperation, and we reviewed the audit results with management prior to them being shared with the Board of Supervisors. And the last slide we have here is related to federal funds. So if you receive and expend in excess of $750,000 in federal funds in any given year, we have what we call a single audit. So we talked about the ARPA funds before. You received $2.4 million, but you didn't physically spend the $2.4 million. So in the case of the current year, you only spent $300,000 and you don't meet the requirements of the single audit. So I think that most municipalities with this ARPA funding, the game plan is to try to keep it within that $750,000, so you don't have to go through the extra procedures of having to get a single audit done. It's just more paperwork on our end, and a lot more compliance requirements, etc. So a lot of municipalities are trying to, frame their expenditures in a way that they won't exceed that $750,000. And kind of outline there in the last two bullet points. What a single audit is and what would need to be required. So, any questions, concerns? I mean, all good news in terms of, Township's in a good financial spot. Makes your job easier as Board of Supervisors to be able to respond to any kind of unanticipated financial.
Just one question, just for my own education here. In the final report here on page 4, on financial highlights, you have the amount of the assets, we have $29,170,000 represent unrestricted net position, which may be used to meet the government's ongoing obligations to its citizens and creditors. That's the first bullet point. What's the difference between that and the fourth bullet point, where the township's governmental funds reported combined ending balances of $27,272,000, name price of $3.1 million in comparison to the prior year, and approximately 68% of the total, or $18.6 million, is available for spending at the township's discretion to sign and unsign. So I'm a little confused there. So you're saying there's $29 million which is available for government's ongoing obligations for citizens and creditors, but then you have another figure there of $18.6 million available for spending. So what's the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, these financial statements are, if you're not a person that does with governmental accounting all the time, it is super confusing. So back in 2002, they, basically the second paragraph that you talked about is what we call modified accrual base of accounting, which is, you're focusing on the current assets and the current liabilities. So there's dual reporting here. There's the full accrual accounting, and then there's the modified accrual accounting, which you base your budget on an annual basis. So the modified accrual basis of accounting is kind of like a budgetary basis of accounting. What are our expenditures for the year? What are our revenues need to be to meet those expenditures? And what's our fund balance? And can we use that fund balance to help meet those expenditures on any given year? So I think that's what we're kind of talking about in that second paragraph. The other one is the full accrual accounting, and that's actually on pages. It's probably easier to kind of visualize it in your head. And it kind of includes everything, makes it look like a business. That's on page 22 of your audit report. And then you can kind of see where, that unrestricted amount is. So when we're talking about that $29 million, you're talking about West Goshen as a whole. You're talking about what we call your governmental activities, which are more consistent with what we just talked about. The general fund, the capital reserve fund, all being combined with the governmental activities, and the business type activities being the sewer fund and the the waste and recycling fund. So there's that $29 million on the bottom right hand corner of it. So it kind of all encompasses all the assets of the township, being not only those governmental activities of the general fund and all those non-major governmental funds, but also the assets in the sewer and the waste and recycling and all that. So it's kind of a more of a full picture, looking at West Goshen as one big business in terms of what are current assets or non-current assets, and it kind of gets a little murky in terms of and confused, to say the least.
Other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a question regarding the capital assets. I guess it would be on page 18 and 19. Where you described the capital projects that occurred between the sewer and the township. Is that all the projects, or is it just a few that you listed there?
I think it's all of them.
That's all of them.
Okay, so I didn't see the West Town pump station on there. I saw some other pump stations.
It's listed as, that West Town Way is pump station 13, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And that's listed on there. It's just a different title for it.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just what is recorded as in our system, yeah.
Okay, I don't know, it's 15, I know it's West Town.
Yeah. Everybody calls it something different.
Yeah.
Other questions from the board?
But just to go back, I mean, I know you asked the questions about the, you specifically went to management's discussion analysis, and just another thing, I encourage everybody to read those pages, because, like, there's some really detailed information in there that kind of give you a good idea of the rest of the audit report by just reading that.
I noticed we have two of our elected auditors present, and obviously other members of the public here. Does anyone have any questions for Carl? Okay. Any last questions from the board? Well, thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive presentation, and I think I both got an education and realized why I didn't want to do accounting when I went to school. So.
Yes.
I can't say, I didn't say I went to college. I'm going to audit municipalities and nonprofits. I just went for my first job interview, and they wanted to pay me the most, and that's why I ended up doing it. So
Well, that's a good
that's
answer.
how we do with taxes and stuff, but don't do any taxes at all. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Carl, for pinch hitting, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, all right. Thanks. If you have any more questions, just relay them through whoever. And, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is item number 7, mid-year 2023 budget review and discussion, and we have Christine Rippey with us, our finance director. So, Christine, I don't know if you want to just talk to any headlines or not. I know you don't have a presentation. Is there anything you want to highlight in the information that was provided to the board and the public in your document?
No, I mean, the only thing I'll really say is revenues have really been kind of right in line with what we were expecting them to be, with the exception of interest earnings, because we did implement that new CD structure program at the beginning of the year that was not included as part of the budget process. So we are seeing some excess revenues there, but aside from that, everything's pretty well in line on the revenue side. We haven't had any real major expenditure changes either. Paving did come in a little bit under budget too, so that's a big part of the savings. Other than that, there's not anything super major. I did provide, just my explanations on, kind of where those numbers came from. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has on any of the reasoning behind those or how we got to that point. So.
Sounds good. So, is there any questions from the board for Christine?
Quick question. So, regarding the CD, when we decided to do that, when are we going to see those returns?
Not until December.
I thought so.
Yeah.
We had this conversation. When
Yeah,
we were
so
talking about that.
it's limiting your monthly revenue right now in terms of interest earnings. But honestly, the rates are still up from what we were seeing last year, so it's not too big of an impact overall. But you're going to see the benefit of that in December.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I actually had 2 questions on the traffic signal maintenance. Approximately 60% of the budget expense has been completed with half a year remaining. Is that just signs we're buying? What is that about?
No, that's just maintenance on the traffic signals, incidents that have happened, that sort of thing.
Unpredicted things that occur
Yeah,
that we
yeah. I
didn't
mean, when we
anticipate.
budget those numbers, it's really just an estimate. You have no idea, how many traffic signals are going to get hit in accidents or, things are going to break and that kind of stuff. So that just happens to be where we are right now.
I know we had a significant issue with the signal at 5 points in Route 3 that we had to deal with. We had an issue with the signal out here at 202 and Bailey Pike and a few other ones.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of ebbs and flows from year to year, just kind of depending on what's happening. So.
Okay, and then another question regarding the police detail, like Hibby State, do we see that coming back or increasing at all? And decrease because of the employees being laid off?
It decreased because our duties changed, but it's fully reimbursed, so the net is zero at the end of the year.
Okay. Could we
But
see that
I-
coming back?
Yeah.
Could we see the QBC increasing again, or no?
Not to the degree of what.
At 12 hours a week? Okay.
I think it was a decision to save money on their end, to not pay for police hearing, right?
I'm sure it was.
Thank you. You got a
Yeah,
question?
that's all.
I had a couple of questions. In your notes, you mentioned about the reductions at QVC. It wasn't known at the beginning of the year whether those reductions would have a significant impact on the workforce here in Westchester and West Goshen, or whether they would be impacting QVC locations elsewhere. At mid-year, do you have any more detailed insight as to what that situation is?
No, obviously that's not information they're going to really release to the public. I can only see, based on the receipts that we're getting for EIT now, because of what we were getting before, it is about a 2% decrease for 2022 and 2021. That's the only real.
Is that specific to QVC, or are you talking at the total level?
Just total overall, but that's the only real significant change.
Are you able to get the granular detail of QVC
I
receipts?
can try, to see if they can give us a report by,
Would that be through Keystone?
that would be for Keystone, yeah. We do get reports, on the receipts that we're getting and stuff, it's just not that granular to see, how many receipts are coming from each individual employer.
Maybe as we go into the budget process for 2024, it'd be good to get two pieces of information. One is, hey, QVC, have you gone through your workforce reduction? And then secondly, get from Keystone what impact we're seeing between 22 and what we'll see,
And that's something that we've already been doing in the budget process. That's definitely already on our radar. We have been working with Keystone the last probably 3 or 4 years to get estimates directly from them because obviously they have the database of that information and all employers and taxpayers and they have much more detail than we do. So we've been trying to collaborate with them on those estimates.
And we could get some of the new companies all in the pharmaceutical. I don't know if that's going to offset it. I don't know how many employees QVC have.
Yeah,
One thing.
I was just going to say, sometimes we will get an indicator through transfer tax and property sales and things like that. So far, we have not seen anything big like that come in. QVC did sell a big parcel right before the layoffs were announced. So, we sometimes get indicators that way, but so far we have not seen, any indicators of any indication of a bigger company coming into the township that way.
So just one thing related to the EIT, and I apologize for PennDOT. They decided to mill during our meeting, so
we're just glad PennDOT is doing some work.
But EIT, one thing about EIT to remember is, even though you may have a new business open up, that may not be reflected because the earned income tax is paid to your home municipality. So unless you're a municipality that doesn't collect an earned income tax, like for example, there are a number like Delaware County who don't collect an earned income tax, and there are a couple in Chester County. West Goshen Township wouldn't realize any tax benefit from that, since the employees their taxes being remitted to their home municipality. Now we would get only if, for example, if their home municipality's EIT rate is say like 0.5%, then we would realize the difference on the non-resident side. But if they're at the full 1%, such as West Goshen, we wouldn't realize anything.
Christine, am I right in assuming that the additional expense for the maintenance on the shooting range is not included in your balance information here? I mean, that's going to be coming up here as an additional expense.
I saw that.
Is it in there?
I mean, I know when I talked to Mark, that was a reduction in materials. Was the shooting range, I don't know.
So I'm looking at expenses over budget. Is it in there?
No. Is that budgeted?
It was unbudgeted. It was unbudgeted and accrued to $25,000.
No, that's not in there. I was not aware of that.
Does that have to do with road?
Well,
No, it was being pulled out of the shooting range maintenance in the police department budget.
Portion of it is, but then I think the rest of 25 is coming from.
We were gonna we were coming to 10, but it was all going to be allocated towards the range line item in the budget.
So why does it say anticipated work?
Because
shooting
when I
range?
had talked to Mark, our roads guys are gonna be doing the work
Okay.
down there.
Right.
So they're in turn.
Taking
gonna
their
be-
time.
Yes,
Yeah.
so that's gonna be less that they can dedicate on there. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. You explained it better than
Because it's
me.
going to take my guys off the street probably for 2 weeks or so, so
Yeah.
we won't be spending money out on the street, because we'll be spending time down at the range.
Right.
That's all we get.
Got it.
And when do you think that work's gonna start, you think?
Beginning of the middle of August.
Middle of August?
Yeah, when that rest of the materials come in.
And then, just so I'm clear, I think the CMP pipe work that we're going to do, or we'll be talking about later on, potentially going to authorize, and any additional work that may get done this year, that's not in the general fund, that's going to come out of the
Correct.
American Rescue Plan Fund, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then one last question, if the overage that we've discussed previously on the electrical infrastructure project, that would come out of capital reserve
Correct.
balance, and again, does not have an impact on these general fund numbers.
Yep, that's correct.
What about the, I think it was 18,000 we spent on the stormwater professional services, and we don't have any money there, just other than the Corps of Engineers was terminated. On the assessment?
Were you talking about the regional study?
Yeah.
That was all paid out of ARPA.
Oh, the whole thing, 100%?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there anything you're aware of that the board may not be aware of in terms of unanticipated or unexpected expenses in the second half of the year at this point?
Not at this point. I did try to, reach out and talk to the different, department heads in terms of revenue, in terms of, expenses. It's still early in the year, so anything can happen, but not that I'm aware of at the moment. Hopefully it stays that way.
Maybe good things can happen too.
Yeah.
And the $20,000 over budget for the utilities, is that just for increased usage, or?
It's a little bit of both. I didn't, I haven't had, when we do the budget, I've delved into that a little bit more. That's just where we're trending right now, overall, with electricity usage, water usage. That's just where we're trending right now with our current rates, so.
And the other thing to consider.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing to consider is I'm pretty confident that the new rate for electricity was entered into and approved after after the budget was completed and presented to the board for adoption. So it may not have been fully factored into the final numbers that
Maybe
were
slightly
included
higher.
in the budget.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, the budget's always just a best guess at the time, and as we know, things kind of change sometimes on a daily basis, but.
Dave, I don't think those bids were open until like mid-December.
Yeah, it was mid-December for January start.
Yep.
Right, so, stuff like that happens.
It was a pretty good
It was a significant increase.
Any other questions from the board? Is anyone attending who has questions for Christine? Okay, well, thank you, Christine. Very comprehensive. Yeah, my only request is if you just make the font a little
I
bigger.
know,
on
I
that
tried
one.
to keep it, consolidated on pages. I didn't want to make it too long, but.
Thank you again. Next on the agenda is item number 8, discussion regarding the pricing for projects outlined in the corrugated metal pipe CMP analysis completed for West Goshen Township. Chris, if you could introduce this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to Dave and Mark to fill in any additional information that I may miss. So before the board this evening is discussion regarding pricing for projects outlined in the corrugated metal pipe analysis completed for the township. This was based on the presentation that was done by HRG back on May 2nd, pertaining to the results of video data collected on the CMP in the township from the Army Corps of Engineers, which outlined 12 projects that should be targeted. I provided a copy of the projects that were outlined, as well as 3 additional projects that were discussed during the presentation, which were the Fresh Meadows subdivision, Stony Brook subdivision, and the Old Greystone Drive. Mark Bertolami contacted companies through CoStars to obtain pricing for the cleaning and videoing of these areas in order to better assess the condition. The 2 companies were Soft Dig Underground Services, Inc. I provided the pricing for them for the board's consideration on a per-hour basis, and More Construction Services, Inc. which again was provided on a per hour basis for the board's consideration. And I will note that the pricing for soft dig included the labor costs for their technicians. It is difficult to determine the number of hours it would take to complete these areas. As such, in speaking with Mark, we recommend that if the board desires to proceed forward this work, it be authorized at a not to exceed figure. For example, proceeding forward with soft dig, be authorized to exceed amount of $54,000, which would provide 120 hours worth of work based on the quoted hourly rate. The Public Works Department would need to determine how large of an area could be completed in the specified number of hours, and in terms of payment, this could be allocated through the American Rescue Plan Act funds that are available for the township.
Thanks, Chris. Board, do you have questions?
I have a couple of questions. Mark, in your research, were these the only two vendors that were available in CoStars that could do this kind of work?
I did reach out to Snyder Environmental, who did the Legion job, but they did not get back to me on pricing recently. They did a few months ago, and they were above these because they have to come out of, it was like 3.5 hours away, so they have to mobilize for the whole week.
Yeah, pay for
They have a
travel.
hotel, and it just seemed like it was a lot more.
So that was the only one besides these two?
Correct.
To be correct. And in your analysis of it, is the scope of work at Soft Dig and Moore Construction, are they basically apples to apples as far as their pricing? And what they're willing to do or able to do?
I've never had Soft Dig do jetting and cleaning. I've had them do Soft Dig where they're locating utilities, and they're excellent. They did an outstanding job on that.
I'm going to prejudge where the board might go with this, but if we were to select Soft Dig, would you want to follow with references relative to the work that they have done elsewhere using jetting equipment?
I think they're local, they're on Haggard Boulevard. I think we give them a shot for a week or two. If I don't like it,
Okay.
we'll go more.
I just had a quick question. So what is the remaining fund from American Rescue Plan?
Based on the calculations from the when the Balmar Street was approved, it was roughly $1 million, assuming that the Andrews Drive project that was allocated in there was done in-house. And I know Mark's crew has been working on the Andrews Drive project as best they can to reduce that cost. Assuming that cost is in there, it's like $736,000 once the Balmar Street project is fully paid out.
Was that the project where we thought it was going to be way
Correct.
under and then it ended up like doubling almost?
It was approximately double what we budgeted.
Yeah.
Just so I'm clear, Chris, you just said that after Andrews and Baltimore, we have 750 left.
It's roughly 736
After Andrews.
after Andrews, and factoring in the cost awarded in the bid for Balmar
And
Street.
that's all
Yes.
2.4
Correct.
million. Okay.
You can spend $2.4 million very quickly on these infrastructure projects.
So my guess is we will be having a single audit for 23, given the amount of money we're spending on Baltimore and these other pieces of work.
I've spoken to Christine about that. There's the possibility that we may not, depending on how the bills fall in the calendar year. We just got our first payment request for the Balmar Street project, and it's going to depend on how much is spent out. But it's not unlikely.
If we do have the audit, I noticed ours was like 18,000, would the cost still be the same for a kind of a quote mini audit?
I don't know. I've never gone through a single
Right.
audit process, but can't opine on what that cost would
Okay, I was
be.
just curious. And then I have a question. There's 6 that are major problems on here, 6 different locations. Would we do the non-major and the major, or are we just looking to do the major right now? The 6 that are really deteriorating.
Well,
I mean, bottom rusted out of pipe, I'm looking at that as major.
one thing we came across recently was that those 12 areas, I believe 8 of them are RCP. So there's a little issue there.
What's RCP? What is
Concrete.
that?
Reinforced
Okay.
concrete plane. So I'm tending to go toward I think 3 or 4 areas that are CMP, and then get into one of the major ones.
I do need to let the board know that earlier this week, Brian, Chris, and myself visited a homeowner next to Cloud Park because of a serious flood event that occurred on that property 2 weekends ago when the storm was really bad. He had both Friday and Saturday night had substantial depth of water at the back of his property. There is a storm drain there. When we inspected it, it's partially blocked by concrete that looks like it might have been there when the actual inlet was constructed. So we discussed with the homeowner making this one of the priorities for this piece of work. So I just want to let the board know we've now added a 13th project.
Are you saying that the concrete that was blocking contributed to the cause of the flooding?
It certainly is a problem because how big was that pipe, Brian? 30 inches? It was reduced to half that capacity.
The 30-inch pipe is approximately half full. But it looks like it was designed and installed. It doesn't look like it.
And that's already a problem property, right? Everything's sort of closed down all the backside.
Yes.
So the idea is to have it televised to see if it is the concrete, what the extent of the concrete pipe is.
Because it's only at the entrance, there's potentially a simple, nothing is simple, but it could be easy to modify that inlet relative to the problem versus if in actual fact that concrete has traveled a significant distance and set, it's a different scale of problem.
Are you talking about the concrete pipe right at the driveway?
No, it's on the property behind the house.
Oh, okay.
It's the pipe that goes under the railroad magnet.
Okay.
It's identified as inlet C5 on that report.
Are these sites then, is this sort of a living document where if, let's say, we get into one of these major issues and you come across another issue that you think takes precedence over one of these others that are listed, you're going to focus your time on something worse? Is that how it's going to work?
I would think so. I mean, when we've got a known situation of a real problem like occurred 2 weekends ago, when we can, mobilize them to do this work, it would absolutely make sense to go and have a look at whether that particular inlet could be modified to get the capacity back that was potentially should be there from day one.
Do we have an estimate what that cost is going to be?
Well, it would be part of this $54,000 we're going to spend. So, Mark, in addition to the CMP priorities that you just mentioned as your focus, we need to just add this in as one of those top ones.
And that's in an easement, that's in a storm.
He is given permission to.
He's given us written permission to go in there.
We can come in from Cloud Park, come back to the edge of his trees, and then it's probably 20 to 30 feet from the trees.
Okay, we can take care of it.
He's given us written permission to go in there, and he's just asked us to notify him on the date.
Not a problem.
And then to answer the question regarding the balance in the American Rescue Plan Fund, as of June 30th, the balance was just over $2 million. But we're going to spend $836,000 plus whatever else was going to be spent. Excluding Andrews Drive, it'll probably be around $1 million.
We paid the bills for the feasibility study that Carol performed, or is that still outstanding as well?
We have one more left to pay that we just got from Carol on Thursday.
That's not on.
It is. It was budgeted in our budget.
Yeah. We used up. Other questions from the board? Any questions from anyone in attendance?
So just to clarify that, so for the total scope of the work here we're talking about, we have 13 areas, or do we have plus another 3 areas here?
You would actually have 16 areas, including
My bad.
including the area that Mr. Walsh mentioned.
Which is Ashbridge Road.
Yeah.
So that would be what, 17 areas?
60.
16?
You got 12 plus these 3 that are listed in Chris's report,
Oh,
Fresh
16,
Meadows,
okay.
Stony Brook, Greystone, plus Ashbridge Drive.
But I would follow.
So are we gonna, would you prefer us to tackle the 12 areas first on HRG report?
We're looking for you guys to decide, based on your view of the information, your knowledge of where the risks are, like, I just said another one on Loxley Drive, right? So you know areas you feel are a priority. And if we authorize tonight 54,000, we'd like you guys take the lead on what you think we need to look at the most, along with Ashbridge.
We talk about it in-house.
Yeah. That's my view. Is anyone on the
Yeah,
board
but
disagree?
I agree. I think the Ashbridge would be one of the top of the list.
All right, we'll do that first.
Okay, well, I will make the motion to approve the authorizing a not to exceed amount of $54,000 to use soft dig to advance the inspection, jetting clean out of the priority areas as determined by Public Works staff. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Chairman, what we'll do, we'll work internally, we'll get what we can done for that amount of money, and then we'll report back to the board.
Sounds good. Are there any board questions or comments on the motion?
No, but they say they can start 7/24. Is that right?
Yes.
Is there any public comments on the motion? Okay, I'm ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Dave. Next up is agenda item 9, discussion regarding West Goshen Township's existing electricity supply contracts with Constellation Energy. And Chris, could you introduce this one, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So before the board this evening is information regarding 5 remaining electrical supply contracts with the Township of Constellation Energy. These contracts are set to expire in September of 2023. Constellation Energy notified the Township and offered to extend the contract for 12 months at a rate of 8.99 cents per kilowatt hour. By way of reference, for similar sized accounts, the Township is paying, as of January 2023, 8.078 cents per kilowatt hour. So Dave contacted the individual who handles the energy procurement process for CoStar, Scott Hartford. Mr. Hartford advised that the next bid for CoStars will be in the October-November timeframe, and advised that the townships should have Constellation return the accounts to PICO under the price to compare, which is fixed for these size accounts, which, as of today, would be 9.61 cents per kilowatt hour. However, there are price adjustments 4 times throughout the year, and then we would participate in the bid in the fall. So in reviewing this information, we believe that there are 2 options for consideration at this time. Allow the accounts to return to PICO in September and pay the current PICO price at the time, and then participate in the bid in the fall. And we would recommend doing a 1-year contract to try and line up our electricity supply contracts, because we did a 2-year contract currently, and so they would expire at the same time. Or authorize re-engagement with Constellation Energy at the quoted rate for 12 months, and then look to participate in the CoStars bid that occurs in the fall of 2024 for new pricing.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
Just for my own clarification, if we went with the Constellation bid from September through September 2024, will we then need to go to the PICO market rate for 3 months before we could access whatever the outcome of the CoStars bid process was on January 25?
Yeah, because January is the start date.
Yeah, so we could put these accounts in the bid process, but they wouldn't go to the successful bid of a CoStars bid until January 25.
Right.
So if we only do a year with Constellation, that's going to expire in September 24. We have to just go to PICO for 3 months. They're not big accounts.
No, it's Community Park, Barker, Coopersville.
What do we feel that Constellation's fixed price is going to remain below where PICO pricing will be, given that the PICO pricing is adjusted every 3 months? Does anybody have a feel for that?
I think that's hard to say. The electricity rates move very frequently.
Board questions or comments?
Well, basically, what we're discussing is whether or not we should go with the CoStars bid in 2023 for 2024 or 2024 for 2025.
Right.
So, in your assessment of CoStars and the bidding process, do we have a better shot at getting a more competitive price?
Again, it's going to depend on the bids at the time. I didn't think that they would come back as high as they did when we did the bid before.
No, I was actually surprised once in December when they opened the bids. We did it with one other entity out of First County. They had much more accounts, service than Lehigh, sorry. And we wound up with a cheaper rate than they did. So it didn't.
So can you explain to me just what it means about the township's accounts expiring at the same time? So what's currently happening there?
So because we participated in a 2-year contract in the fall that kicked in January, we have all those accounts that will expire in January. If we participate in this bid in the fall, our goal would be to do a one-year contract, so then all of our electrical supply contracts, these 5 plus the ones that were just renewed, would all kind of be up at the same time, so that we're not in a situation where, well, these are up at this time, this is up at this time.
So administratively, it would be on you.
Correct.
Well,
Does it work?
the other thing we could do is talk with Scott, see if he's gonna have another one in December or January. We asked for the
We asked
next,
for the fall.
the next closest bid.
Which is like in October.
October, November.
Yeah, but if he's gonna have another planned bid in December for January start, it may be better for us to get in that bid, knowing that we wanna loop them all together. And
So then what's the significance of September? Would we then,
These contracts expire at staggering times in September, starting with September 7th for the first one, and then the last one expires September 30th. That's just the rate that's just when they were set up.
yeah,
And we can't do month to month.
we
I-
had to.
Contract with the existing contracts.
Well, that would be the PICO option, where they would return the PICO, and that's pretty much that's just month to month.
Yeah.
So, and then we could,
I mean,
That
to
would be
me, it sounds like doing consolidating everything would be.
Well, and the reason we did the 2-year option when we did the other accounts in December of 25, CoStar's through Penn State is going to have a massive bid out there for energy.
Yeah, I mean, so we definitely want to line up with that.
Yeah, that's
So,
that's
yeah,
the
you know, how we get from these expiring in September to having all our accounts, including these, in that bid process at the end of next year is what we're talking about tonight.
Right.
Well, maybe
So
we should
would that
find out,
happen?
we should find out first if we can get in the bidding
Well, we've got
process in
these
January,
options.
February, before we make a decision.
But it'll all line up.
well, if they're going to even have another bid,
Then what's that mean?
all those
They're gonna
works.
have another-
But one way or the other, we're going to, if we do that now, we're going to have to do month to month,
Anyway,
either until
we go.
October or January. You know.
So the decision is kind of made.
Yeah, so my recommendation would be, let this go back to the PICO rate when they expire, and then do whichever bid opens up on CoStar, so that we can align everything all
So we're
the time.
talking a couple months from PICO and then
Yeah,
switching it up.
Yeah, and there's actually going to be a 6th account for the EV charter and all the community fund.
Is there any risk that we wait until this December CoStar's bid, and then it doesn't happen, and we're left with PICO accounts for a whole year?
Well, for the December 25,
So if we go to PICO now in September,
Right.
with the intention that we're going to put these in the CoStar's bid for 1 year, and we don't do the October bid process because we think there's going to be one in December.
well, we'll confirm that
We'll
before.
confirm that. So we all have a situation where we've missed October and then December doesn't happen, and now we're
Right.
stuck with PICO or something for
Right.
free. Okay.
I mean, it would be cleaner if they are going to have a bid in December, it would be cleaner to hold these accounts, put them in a December bid for a year,
Yeah.
and then catch them all up together. Because if we do it in October, November, whenever they bid, we're going to have the same discussion for a month. We're going to have to pull them out of CoStars, put them on PICO for a month, and that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
We're still dealing with some issues with them, with some sewer accounts.
So this big bid from CoStar's is December 24, and that's going to go ahead. And the one we just, the accounts we just done expired at the end of that year.
Yeah, they're set to go into the big bid.
I believe, I support the recommendation Chris just said, we just let these accounts move to PICO now. And again, the CoStar's bid in December of 23 for 1 year. And then at that point, all our accounts will line up in December of 24 for the bid process. Well, does anyone on the board disagree with that?
And the one thing to consider when the bids are open, we need to select that at that time. So assuming we can confirm that there will be one in December, would the board be willing to grant Dave and I authorization to execute on the 1-year contract?
Yes, because these accounts are not that large.
It's kind of a unique process the way they do it. You have to, when they open a bid, you have to agree to it right then and there.
So how often do they have bids on CoStars? You say there's one in the fall, which would be October, November, and then another one in December?
We're hoping there's another one in December.
Yeah, so you don't know.
We'll confirm that.
Okay. But how often do they do the biddings or open up the bids on CoStar?
It depends on how many entities they can get to put a bid package together.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Does anyone attending have any questions about this discussion? Okay, then I will make the motion to, let's see, to allow the current existing contracts to expire and revert to the PICO market price until as such time as Dave determines we can do a bid process with CoStars for 1 year so that all accounts will line up at the end of 2024. Does that make sense as a motion?
Mr. Chairman, and authorizing myself and Dave to select the 1-year pricing for the township.
Yes, and then participating in the fall or December CoStars bid, the motion also includes authorizing Chris and Dave to approve the bid price that we get.
I'll second that motion.
And we will, of course, report that back to the board.
Good luck writing that up, Jennifer. That was a long motion.
We'll do it as a team.
Okay. Is there any questions from the board about the motion? Any questions from anyone attending? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Chris. Next is agenda item number 10, reports for the month of June 2023, with the police report up first, presented by Chief Michael Carroll.
Thank you. I'll be giving you 2 reports tonight, one for the month of June 2023 and one for the first half of the year of 2023. So for June's report, we responded to 1,988 calls for service. 53 of those were alarms, and 1 of those alarms was found to be valid. 59 accidents, 22 of which were reportable, and we drove a total of 19,021 miles. In the area of extra traffic enforcement, we performed that on Sunset Hollow Road, Westchester Pike, Falcon Lane, South 5 Points Road, Mackenzie Drive, and Taylor's Mill Road, South New Street, South High Street, and West Warren Road. And in addition to our normal monthly training through Lexipol and the ACWIN, or the required training through the state, most of the department completed their CPR first aid training. Some just completed it this week, but the department will get that training done in June and July. Sergeant Holman attended a realistic de-escalation instructor course. Officer Ass attended woman in command training. Officers Manco and McGee attended Gracie level training, which is our defensive tactics instructor course. Officer DeLeon and Walsh attended active shooter training. Officers Myers and Spigarelli attended the Safe School Summit here in Westchester. And Sergeant Chrysler, Officer Ash, and Officer Virgilio attended the Trimble Reconstruction Demo, which is a traffic reconstruction device. In the area of assist to other departments, excuse me.
Mike, while you're looking that up, is this Trimble reconstruction device something we have, or
No.
did you just get after an event from
It's
county or what?
I'm sorry?
How do we access this Trimble device?
Well, it's a decision whether we want to or not.
Okay. And who would own the device? Is it a private company,
So,
or is it
I don't know about the
department?
specific Trimble device. We currently own a device for that purpose now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how long we've had it. We've had it a while, so we may be looking what we're going to do in the future.
Okay.
But some of these devices are owned by several departments at once.
Okay.
So in the area of assisted other departments, a total of 39 times for 21.6 hours, and have received assist from other departments 28 times this month. In the area of the alarm violations, we had a total of, I have to add it all up, I forget. I said 53 total alarms. Of those 53, 4 of those violations were of the highest amount, in excess of 7 for the year.
So 4 locations had reached a false alarm count of 7 as of June 30th.
So that's actually, it's 4 events, it's actually 3 locations. One of them happened twice this month, or that month.
Okay. And which locations were they like?
We go with memory now. Portsgate, ACAC, and Able Equipment.
Have we had any conversations with the management there about this problem, other than every time?
No, they've gotten to the level where each violation is a $500 fine.
Yeah. And it's only in the middle of the year.
We sent letters out to the Mitchell, also our people, we're going to send letters out to them.
We did those with the fire alarms.
Okay.
So if anyone has any questions on June of 23, I can take those now.
Does anyone have any questions for Mike about the stats for this month? Does anyone attending have questions for the chief? Okay.
Just have one question on the year-to-date alarms for the police department. Was it 277 alarms that were responded to in the first half of the year?
So I haven't done that report yet. It's actually 312 alarms for the first half of the year.
312. And of those, how many were actually true alarms?
24.
That was how many alarms? 300.
12.
280.
Mike, do you want to go over some of the other year-to-date comparison stats?
Sure. So year-to-date for 2023, we responded to 12,781 calls for service. 312 of those were alarms, 24 of which are determined to be valid. We responded to 374 accidents, 128 of which were reportable accidents, and we've driven a total of 110,199 miles.
The arrest summaries this year over year. Do you have a feel for any change in the amount of arrests, 23 versus 22?
I think we're on. I mean, they fluctuate slightly, but generally speaking, we're at a steady rate.
Is there anything relative to the classification of offenses that is noteworthy this first 6 months?
No. Everything's generally steady. When you see a fluctuation, it corrects itself very quickly.
At the police community event this week, we discussed the continuing problem of elder fraud. Is that on the rise in 23 versus previous years, or is it just a
continuing problem of
elderly frauds?
Our overall larceny thefts continue at a relatively steady pace, but the type of those thefts, I think, is changing. We're getting more losses with the scams, the computer scams, the phone scams than 5 years ago, certainly.
Any questions for Mike on the 6-month data? Anyone in attendance have a question for Mike? Thank you, Chief Carroll. We appreciate it as ever. We also have reports from the Chester County Department of Emergency Services and from our EMS providers, Good Fellowship, and our fire companies, Goshen Fire and Westchester Fire. So, do we have any questions from the board? Is there any questions from the board about those reports this month? Okay. Very good. We'll move on to agenda item number 11, which is the Board of Supervisors announcements. We'll start with Tina. Have announcements, Tina?
Yes, we do. June 21st, I attended the Westchester School District Safe Schools Summit. I was at East High School from 9:30 to 3. I think it was well attended and learned a lot. So on June 29th, we had a Zoom with Ed Radcliffe, who's the Township Manager at Kennett, to talk about how they handle regionalization in their area and how they've handled it. On June 30th, we had a Zoom with Mark Hershey, Elizabethtown, on their EMS and fire tax and how they manage it. On July 3rd, we had Cloud Park baseball field dedication for Ray Halverson. It was well attended, got 100 people. July 4th, they had West Goshen had the bike parade. I want to thank Ken Lear, Tom Stein, and all the volunteers in the West Goshen Township. They did a great job. July 6th, we had an internal meeting on follow-up with energy transfer pipeline exercise. Our next meeting is going to be in a couple weeks to finalize that. The checklist of items that still need to be done. July 11th, I rode with the police until midnight. Thank you very much. I learned something every time I ride with you guys, so I thank you. It's definitely a different vibe at night than during the day, so it was a good experience. July 13th, we had our coalition meeting, and we had guests from Elizabethtown Borough and Lower Moreland Township on different ways that they manage their EMS and fire tax. So it was interesting to see the different methodologies and how the same thing was handled. And then I just had 2 announcements. I want to make the public aware that there's going to be the Crime Victim Fundraiser on September 9th from 2 to 6. And the next police community meeting is going to be on October 19th from 6 to 8. That's it.
Thank you, Tina. Appreciate it. Ashley?
Just a couple of announcements. So Emily Kaplan, who is an intern with the Sustainability Office for the County Planning Commission, reached out to ask some questions about our electrification study and our transfer to EV electric vehicles for our municipal fleet. And so I talked to her for a while because the Planning Commission sort of wants to highlight West Goshen initiatives on their website. So I thought that was really good for the township. And best luck to Emily. She's doing a good job over there in the county. And we also attended the bench dedication from the Lions Club. That was a great event. And yeah, that's really all I have.
Thank you, Ashley. John?
I attended the Westchester School District Safety Conference along with some of the other folks from the school, from the board here, on Wednesday, June the 21st. And that attended the session I attended was about school resource officers, which was very interesting on the information they had. Then on Thursday, the following day, on the 22nd, the same conference, attended the active shooter profile session. Rather sobering, quite frankly. Then attended the gazebo dedication on the Sunday, June the 25th for J. Arnold Blair in the West Goshen Community Park. Then on the 26th of June, attended the Cato Conference. Then on the field dedication for Ray Halverson on Monday, July 3rd. And attended this, along with staff, to review the tabletop report along with Tina. One of the outstanding items that we still have to resolve on Thursday, July 6th. And like Tina already mentioned, we're following that up shortly. Then also attended the Fire and EMS Coalition meeting on Thursday, July 13th, along with the police community meeting, as already mentioned. The next one is going to be on October 19th, and that's going to be focusing on the theme there on scams on seniors in our community. So hopefully we can get the word out and get good attendance from folks in the area.
Okay, thank you, John. Just a couple of announcements for myself. The board met in executive session on June the 27th with the township manager to review progress against his 2023 performance objectives. I attended many of the same events that have already been described, including the gazebo rededication, the Cato conference, the great event for celebrating and recognizing Ray Halverson at Cloud Park, the dedication of a bench to the community park from West Goshen Lions Club, and the police community event this week. Moving on, agenda item number 12, Township Manager's announcements.
Mr. Chairman, I only have a few announcements this evening. The first is our e-newsletter will go out at the end of this week. The Park and Recreation Department is continuing their summer concert series. The next one will be this Sunday, July 23rd at 6:30 p.m. in Community Park. It's going to be the Westchester Band, so that'll be in Community Park. Our stormwater report that was presented by Carroll Engineering is up and available on the Township website. You can access all the individual reports as well as the index of what was completed. We also created a online form where people can select their area and provide comments to us, as well as upload pictures. And we're providing those to Carroll Engineering to include in their documentation, and emails from those forms go directly to myself and to Brian through a special email address that was created. There's also a PDF form that people can use, and we've updated the article that'll be in the newsletter to provide all that information.
Excellent, excellent.
PICO is planning to begin their tree trimming work for this year. I believe it's sometime this month. We do have a map of the area that's been run in the last 2 editions of the e-newsletter, and will run in this one as well as available on the Township website. Carroll, speaking of going back to Carroll Engineering, they are working on the bids for the electrification process for the EV vehicles. Dave and I actually just received the bid timeline today, so I think we're targeting the second meeting of September, in which for awarding.
Yeah.
So they're working on those.
How long a bid period are they going to have for the contractors to bid on?
I want to say it was like 30 days.
Yeah.
30 days.
Yeah.
Are we inviting anyone to bid? Do we have any people we want to make aware of?
It'll go on pen bid.
Okay.
What is it, SRE?
That was a solar project.
What are you talking, which department?
The EV charging station. So they are working on those, and we've got the schedule. So we'll look for potential awarding at the second meeting of September, which will mean, in my mind, there's the potential that the cost for that project may be carried between both 2023 and the 2024 budget years. But we're just going to have to get an idea on timing and when construction will ultimately start.
On that particular, on those projects, did you provide Carol with the responsible contractor ordinance checklist that they have to comply with?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Other projects underway. The Beaumont Street project is moving along nicely by all accounts.
Well, they've had some setbacks with the
weather, but it is moving along. That contract is good. They're hoping to have everything completed in time for school to begin in August, but the contract does go until mid-October for punch list items.
So we see setbacks because the weather is not slipping the schedule, it's just delayed.
The schedule's slipping.
Okay.
Once we get these heavy rains, the basin at the old Faulkner dumps right into the creek right there. Yeah. And they brought extra pumps in, but they're held up for a couple of days.
Okay. And then finally, the park plan RFP was advertised and issued on July 13th. Ken and I have sent it to approximately 15 firms.
Did you incorporate the requested amendments?
Absolutely. And we've sent it to 15, I believe it's around 15 firms to date. Ken recently went to a Park and Recreation Society event and got the names of some additional firms we didn't think of, and we sent it directly to them.
Yeah, one question I have back on Carroll Engineering is I think we requested them to advise the board on cost for a sidewalk installation on Rosedale Avenue. Do you have any updates to where they are with that, or like?
We received the base plan right before Brian went on vacation. Brian, did you get a chance to review the survey information?
I took a brief look at the survey. There is a substantial amount of slope where I have absolutely good. All we have currently is the base plan. We haven't gone any further. That was all that was presented. I can help Chris. I believe we asked him for a rough estimate of the cost. So I will reach out to Chris, but yes, he did provide it.
Okay,
so before the day I left.
Yeah, I think it was the day you left.
Yeah.
So we could probably talk about it at one of the August meetings.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But the survey portion of it has been completed.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris? Any questions from anyone in attendance? Very good. Thank you, Chris. We'll move on to agenda item number 13, which is Township Engineers, stormwater announcements, and Greystone Development update. Brian?
So I can give a few updates tonight on stormwater. I know there were some significant storms that happened while I was on vacation. I've been dealing with them. The stormwater complaint or form that has been on the website has been active. We've got a couple complaints come in on that either Chris or myself have responded to. Some have been valid complaints. A couple of them have been complaint. One was for a complaint in East Goshen, so we passed it on to East Goshen. Another one was a guy that asked about why we're not cleaning the stream that's in his backyard, because the stream is backing up in his backyard, and we have to let him know that the stream is his.
One was, why did we allow something that occurred 20 years ago? So, kind of to add on what Brian said, some of them are not so much. Some of the comments are very valid, as some are not really addressing what we're looking for in terms of the comments on the
But you
site.
do respond to them with
Yes.
an education as far as you can as to why, what are the
Yes.
situations. Okay.
Yes, like for example, with the person with the stream, it's entirely on private property.
Yeah.
Additionally, there's been a few other comments and complaints coming in about stormwater trickling in, one or two here or there. I'm addressing them as they come in. I got a new one today. The complaint says, there's more water running down my street in my driveway. Can you stop it?
I mean, are you assuming that the folks have actually looked at any of this information that was posted, or is it just the form is available and they're just responding to a situation they're observing?
Today's complaint was on the handwritten township complaint form. They handwrote it, came in and delivered it on the actual complaint form, not the stormwater.
Okay.
So it was laying on my desk this afternoon. I will be looking at that tomorrow. Woodlands update, I did meet with Ray Grukowski and Dave Woodward. I met with Ray last week to discuss some of the issues with the basin above Wyeth, and also to discuss some of the issues we encountered.
The basin above Wyeth, Wyeth goes from the bottom basin up the hill, doesn't it?
There's the basin that's right above the wall.
Okay, you're talking about at the bottom of Wyeth Road, that itself, it's...
Now, the basin that's above the retaining wall is at the bottom of the line. It's
Yeah.
behind the, it's along there. There were some modifications done to the trail in the basin that were done without a plan or a permit pulled from the townships. We discussed that. They're going to modify it in a way that I think will benefit the basin and the residents below the wall. We discussed that. We discussed the issue with the one manhole on Aram that popped and actually was washed away during the storm because of the outlet structure of the, turns out there's a temporary pipe that's in the inlet that is higher than the outlet of the basin, so the water couldn't, the elevations didn't work to allow a storm that big to pass through it. So the area of least resistance was the inlet top, manhole top. The manhole top was popped and washed over it.
So that's a construction error, or it's a temporary problem?
It's a temporary problem. I have an email from them with a proposed fix. I forwarded on to the Conservation District, because the Conservation has to sign off on it as well, because it's changing the sequence of construction, and I haven't heard back from the Conservation District yet.
Okay.
But it's temporary stormwater control measures that are in place for E&S controls are not designed to handle the storm events that we're getting. It's just, that's the way they are. The state regulations are only designed for lower level events. The high level events, they cannot handle. Additionally, Ray indicated at that meeting that the progress, he's hoping by the end of July to be done with vegetation and soil scraping in the barrens to move into the phase of actually the herbicides. But he didn't have a time limit on how long the herbicide would take.
Have you received this supposedly approved plan?
All we received was a single page that's saying they can do everything this year as a schedule. Would that be a fair statement, Chris?
Yes.
It was a single page from Scott Bush that basically took the 5-year plan and said we're going to do it all at once.
Do we believe his approval is sufficient to allow this to continue as the
One of the questions they asked
scope
was,
of work, or is there another state body that needs to sign off on this?
DCNR signed off on the first one, and we asked if this was signed off on by DCNR and have not got a response.
Do they intend to come to a public meeting and discuss these issues and the park issues with us and the public?
Ray indicated that he's aware of the request to be at a meeting in August.
They're coming August 1st.
Do you have confirmation?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so there's your answer.
Yeah.
As of Tuesday, he said it will be at one of your meetings in August. I'm not sure which one. So he didn't tell me the date. He just said they're repeating meeting in August. And they are continuing to work on phase 5. They cannot pull any permits in phase 5 until they get land development approval. And that approval, the draft letter was given to me by Carolyn before I went on vacation, so I have to review that. And there is a few issues with the dams. One is the question about whether we're going to be putting fencing. The other one is the dam that's by the boathouse off of Gershwin. That dam has some issues with water coming through the face of the dam where it shouldn't be. I'm trying to coordinate a meeting with the contractor and their engineer, who's Jason Culp. He asked about meeting this week. His schedule, my schedule won't match this week. Maybe next week we'll be meeting to discuss it. Maybe to repair that dam. And Ray indicated he's aware of the problem and he's not paying the contractor until he fixes it.
Okay. Was there any discussion around, after completion of the restoration of the serpentine barrens, when they believe the park system would be ready for a punch list review?
Ray indicated he thinks they're going to be ready for his punch list, where he's going to punch it for his contractor first. He anticipates that punch list. He will do his own internal punch list, probably when he's up here in August. Okay. He's hoping that's what he kind of gave the impression. Once his punch list is addressed for him, his punch list, and he's satisfied, then he's going to request his punch list for me. He did not give an estimate at the time.
Okay, well, we can obviously ask that when we meet with the auditors.
Yes.
Any other things related to this?
No.
I'll just note that Dave has been going out to the park to take a look at the trails after the significant storm events, just to monitor any kind of washout, anything. So we have documented what's been occurring.
And I think Ray did acknowledge there was significant damage to the trail system from the storm events.
This is just going to keep happening. And then it's going to become our problem.
I did speak with Randy Carlinging about it. Randy is aware of that. He was in discussions during construction with the contractor about the cross pipes that are supposed to be put in where the trail system is. They determined during construction that the cross pipes, they were going to hold them, not put them in until they figure out the areas that you would buy. Because the design may not have actually worked with where stuff in the field. So they have to come back and be retrofitted. And that is something Randy is monitoring.
Okay, are you going to, I was going to ask how involved you might be in some of the understanding of what the existing punch list items are from the developer, so you could have at least some pre-warning or foresight as to some of the issues that they're trying to maybe modify.
Their punch list is, I would prefer to let them do their own.
Fair enough.
And then that way it's unbiased and I do my own. We do our own as a township.
Okay. Any other questions for Brian? Is there anyone attending who has a question for our engineer? Okay, thanks, Brian. Anything else? No? Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item number 14, zoning officer announcements. Chris?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the zoning hearing board met on June 26th to hear the application for 1126 Grove Road. They were seeking variances from sections 8447 and 8447 H1B for the 2 retaining walls located closer than 10 feet to the right of way of Grove Road. A decision on the application was not rendered at the hearing, and I anticipate that one will be issued at the July 24th meeting of the zoning hearing board. In addition, at the July 24th meeting, the zoning hearing board is going to hear the application for 450 Ellis Lane. This is the one for the Westchester Area School District for proposed improvements to the athletic fields at East High School. They're seeking variance relief from section 8447 G3A to permit a portion of fencing to be 20 feet in height where 10 feet is permitted, and section 8457 10E6 to permit 36.561% paved area where 36.27% currently exists and 30% is permitted. The applicant did come before the board of supervisors at the June 20th meeting for the requested relief, and the board remained neutral on the application. There are no other applications before the zoning hearing board at this time that I'm aware of.
Thanks, Chris. Does anyone have any questions about the upcoming zoning hearing board?
Yeah, I have a question on the application before the zoning hearing board. That was a decision already rendered concerning the wall on High Street. Has the 30-day period for them to appeal that expired? And has there been any appeal made to that decision?
I'm not aware of any appeal. The 30-day period would probably have just expired probably this week, just because of when the written decision was issued, which I think was around June 16th. And I'm not aware of any appeal that's been filed. I can have our solicitor's office check the docket, but I haven't been notified of any appeal that's been filed.
I just been checking it after the period is expired.
We can check on that, report back to the board. So if they got the decision on June 16th, the appeal period is probably expired.
Chris, is that calendar days or business days?
Calendar days.
Okay, so that's a follow-up, Chris.
Yes.
Right. Any other questions about the issues in front of the zoning hearing board? Anyone attending have any questions? Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item number 15, approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of June the 6th, June the 20th, and July the 6th, 2023. Does the board have any corrections or updates to these minutes?
Yeah.
Are they lengthy, John? Because if so, we could ask if you provide them in an email.
Some of them may be, but I can do that. But, let's just start with this one. The June 20th meeting on page 6.
I guess that's fine. June 20th, page 6.
On the last paragraph there, Mr. Kalawowski stated that he would create through the townships, add the word drone there, through woodlands at Greystone, recently. And then on page 7, of that same meeting date, on the first paragraph, it was determined that funds are available to purchase a drone that could be utilized by both the engineering and police departments. So strike both by and insert utilized by both.
Okay.
July the 6th, page 5. On to the fourth paragraph down. Ms. Hersack stated that she needed to review this further, but she believes it would be for rigid metal conduit. Mr. Hellman noted that the plans, strike do not note that the plans, strike that whole 6 words there, and replace it with do not, and change to for above ground applications. That the plans, or just strike that the plans do not designate the use of rigid metal conduit. Did you get that first?
Yes.
Okay, then continuing with that paragraph, Ms. Herzog stated that this is preferred and change that for above ground applications. Strike the word to and put in the word for. And I don't understand what that sentence, and noted that analysis completed for each building in the plan, just strike that sentence. So the whole thing should read, Mr. Hellman asked for the rationale in using rigid metal conduit over PVC. Ms. Herzog stated that this is preferred for above ground applications as well as for safety considerations.
Okay.
Got it.
And then in the next paragraph, I don't quite understand what the last sentence there refers to. The first phase will present what to do with level 1, parentheses, what the township currently has, end parentheses, and down the road will be level 3, larger vehicles for public work purposes. I didn't quite understand what to think.
I'll check the video and clean that up.
Okay. All right.
Sounds like I was mumbling. Okay, John, got anything else?
Yes, on that same page there, on the fourth paragraph, Mr. Walsh made a motion to authorize the bidding of the project, just to lead to expand the necessary information. I don't know what that refers to. To authorize the bidding of the project for additional electric vehicle charging stations and infrastructure at the West Goshen Township Municipal Complex. This is how I suggest it should be changed. Can you repeat that?
No, I have that.
Page 7, same meeting, July 6th, second to last paragraph. Mr. Walsh stated that the bid document should insert the word include performance guarantees for the system.
Just use the word require for that. The
Require?
bid require, yeah.
Okay. So that was on your list?
Yeah.
Mr. Bayshore summarized the board's discussion, and just delete the word not, that the township would purchase the system outright and that prices would be obtained from Power Engineering. And on page 11, the very last paragraph, just delete Mr. Walsh makes a motion.
I have one other correction on page 8 of July 6th. Fifth paragraph from the bottom, Mr. Bayshall stated that he will outline this in the RFP. So that was to include the tree plant, so it would be crystal included. Any other corrections or omissions from board members from the meeting minutes for those 3 dates? Nope. Okay, then, will anyone like to make a motion to approve those as modified meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, John. I'll second the motion. Is there any comments from anyone attending about the meeting minutes? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Next on the agenda is item number 16, approval of the Treasurer's Report dated June the 30th for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. Does the board have any questions about the bills to be paid on the Treasurer's Report?
I just have one question regarding the police car and body worn cameras. Are they replacement or new?
I don't know what the charge was. We had several of them now. They should be under warranty.
It's $8,490.
That's probably warranty.
Oh. So it will be covered under warranty?
That probably is the cost of the warranty.
Okay. It just says car and body worn cameras.
Right, warranty for the full package.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Chris had a question related to the payments made to school taxes, the Westchester Area School District. There were a couple of checks written for those properties. Is there any explanation as to which properties are taxed and which ones are not that the township owns?
The two properties that were listed, one was the one that was larger, I think it was like $3,500. That was for the municipal complex. And then the other property was a driveway off of Judson Drive that I believe leads to the open space for Raceton. When I looked up the 2 UPI numbers on Chesapeake Views, those are the properties they corresponded to. We could attempt to file a request for an exemption from Chester County.
It just seems, that one seems a little odd. I mean, I don't know what exemptions were allowed and what were not allowed under the municipal code law.
I believe they have to be used, they have to be publicly accessible, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we can file for exemptions if they we think they qualify for exemptions.
Can we ask them
minor tax in the municipal complex.
I mean, I don't know what, I'm not an expert in this at all, so I'm just looking to staff and legal advice as to whether we should be paying these school taxes or whether we should be exempt from them.
We'll look into it.
We can look into it. I think at least for the municipal complex, we should be exempt.
Right. Is there any other period in the year where we paid these taxes? Like we already paid some bills, we've overlooked it previously because the school tax bill has just been issued about a month ago, right?
That's correct. I don't know about past years. I have to go back and look at
No,
past years.
not worried about past years. We're worried about what we are paying, whether we should still be paying.
Well, if we file for an exemption, it will not take effect until next year.
Yeah.
Why aren't you worried about past ones?
Well, no,
Will
they
you
get
reimbursed?
Apparently not.
No, they wouldn't be reimbursed.
No.
It's history. Okay, is there any other questions on the bills from the board?
No.
John, you have anything?
Nothing.
Okay. Is there any questions on the bills from anyone in attendance? Okay, I will make the motion to approve the Treasurer's Report dated June the 30th for those funds listed on the agenda and for the bills to be paid from these funds. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. All in favor? No. Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, then we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? I will second. All in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
We have to sell towers.